So it really is all about compromise. And you can compromise with integrity when you understand what the different foods are, which things are more nutrient dense, which things are more necessary for your body. The way that your family eats is very specific to you guys. And so I think it's important to just come into this conversation with as much knowledge and understanding as you can. Hello and welcome to Rejoicing in Motherhood. I am Kirsten Vossler, a mom of 10, and I love being a mom. I am here to encourage, inspire, and equip you to thrive in both motherhood and in life. Today, we are going to dive into a topic that is near and dear to all of us as moms, and that is how do we feed our family healthy food while on a budget? Because let's be honest, feeding a family in this day, no matter what you're feeding them, is going to cost quite a bit of money. So as moms, we want to learn how to utilize our resources in the absolute best way possible and give our kids, ourselves, our husbands, the best food that we can. So here's what today is not going to be. I am not going to tell you exactly what you should eat. I'm not going to tell you how much money you should spend. I'm not going to tell you how much money I spend because you don't live in my house with my exact number of children, with my exact children. You don't live in my same neighborhood. And so the actual budget amount is irrelevant. What we are going to get into today is how to make our resources go as far as they can by choosing nutrient-dense food. So we're going to talk about what is nutrient density, how do we determine what foods are nutrient-dense, and we're even going to talk about some swaps that might be helpful for both budget and health purposes. So I'm not going to tell you what to eat. I'm just going to give you some ideas and some principles, and I'm going to share a little bit about what we do because it's always helpful to me to hear specifics from other people. So while the dollars and cents may be irrelevant, the principles and the specifics of how we eat and how we have decided what to compromise on is going to be helpful to you. There have been so many health fads and trends over the last 40 years that I've been alive that I've kind of come to be a little bit jaded when somebody tells me, this is healthy, this is going to change your life, because I've seen so many things come and go. I mean, I remember growing up in the 80s and 90s and fat was bad for you and salt was bad for you. And everybody was very into this like low fat, low sodium, microwave meals. Like this will help you lose weight. This will help you be healthy. And now it's completely flipped and we're all about, healthy fats and red meat and eggs and salt and minerals and all of this stuff. And so it can get very confusing. So rather than focusing on specific foods that are maybe good or bad, I think it's better and more helpful to me to think about food in a nutrient-dense way. So what am I talking about? Well, density obviously is how much of something is packed into a small space. And when we're talking about food, nutrient density has that same idea. If you take a cucumber, for example, there's a lot of water in a cucumber. There is a lot of vitamins and minerals, but it's a lot of water. And so if you took a whole cucumber and then you took, say, an egg, and you looked at the nutrients that were in an egg versus the nutrients that were in a cucumber, you'd have to eat a ton of cucumbers in order to match the same nutrient amount that you would in an egg. Now, they're different, obviously, but just for sake of our example, an egg is more nutrient dense than a cucumber. So they're both good foods. They're both helpful for our bodies in different ways, but pound for pound or ounce for ounce, an egg has more nutrients in it than a cucumber. So hopefully that will kind of help you understand. This is kind of my framework. This is where I'm coming from. I am looking for nutrient-dense food. That is where I want to put my money. When I'm going to the grocery store, I'm not just thinking about like, oh, what do we want to eat? What would be yummy? I'm actually thinking about like, what is going to actually nourish my family the best? As I'm thinking about what to feed my family, I'm thinking about several things. I'm thinking about nutrient density. I'm thinking about satiety. So what is going to actually make them feel full? And then I'm also thinking about flavor. Of course, because I don't want to cook food that tastes just bland and boring and gross. So I am always working to make sure that whatever I'm cooking is as delicious as it possibly can be. Now, this is a far cry from the way some of us grew up, eating like chicken cooked in water with a little sprinkle of seasoned salt or something. Like, no, we're not doing that in my house. We are cooking things in butter. We are salting and peppering and seasoning to our heart's content, and it is a wonderful way to make your food so delicious and enjoyable. Because let's be real, food is special. Food has the ability to bring people together. It has the ability to bring our families together around the table. There is just nothing like sharing a meal together as a family. And food has the ability to build memories, which is so interesting to me. So that the way that we cook and the flavors that we use in our homes, those are going to carry with our children for a long time. I think most of us can think back to some particular dish or some particular thing that just brings with it a lot of good memories, maybe from our grandma or our mom growing up, or an aunt or a friend, or we always had this at our friend's house and it was so delicious. And food is special that way. So even as we're looking at health and we're thinking about budget, I don't want us to lose sight of the truth that food is special. It is powerful, and God made it that way for us to be able to come together and enjoy a meal together. 1 Corinthians 10:31 says, "Whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do it all to the glory of God." And so that is going to be our theme for today. We want to do everything for the glory of God, including feeding our families, including being good stewards of the resources that we've been given and using them to the best of our ability with our budget. So, my friend, I know this can be a stressful and a huge topic, but we're going to try to make it as simple and glorifying to God as we possibly can. Have you seen the illustration where someone takes a jar and they have big rocks, medium rocks, and tiny rocks, and they want to fill the jar with all of these rocks? And they show the people that if you start with the little rocks and then you put in the medium rocks and you put the big ones on top, that you can't fit all the rocks in the jar. But if you start with the big rocks and you put those in first, then you can put the medium ends and they kind of sift down around. And then you can pour the small rocks in and it fills up the jar very nicely and everything fits. So that object lesson is exactly how I think about my food budget. My big rocks and the things I'm going to invest the most money in are the most nutrient-dense foods that I can get. And those are meat and some high-quality dairy products, maybe eggs. Those are my big rocks. The second level is going to be things like healthy fats, high quality fruits and vegetables. And then the third tiny little rock portion is going to be more like little fun things or little treats or some of the fringe things like baking products and things like that I don't need as much of, but I would like to have a little bit of. So that is exactly how I think about my budget. And I feel like having that idea and that principle is going to help you too. You're going to focus first and spend the most money on the things that are the most nutrient dense. Now, as you shop in the grocery store, most of the time, around the edges of the grocery store are going to be where those whole real foods that are the most nutrient dense are located. So you have your produce section, you have your meat, you have your butcher shop, you have your bakery, you have your dairy products and your eggs. Those are all really great. Now, we'll talk about bakery and bread in a minute because I have some thoughts about that might surprise you. But before we get to that, let's just finish talking about this grocery store. So then in the middle of the grocery store, you have aisles and aisles and aisles of packaged and processed food. Packaged and processed food is never, no matter what the packaging says, never going to be as nutrient dense as the real food you find around the edges of the grocery store. So you can save yourself a ton of time and money by trying to stay mostly on the edges. Of course, there are a few things in the middle that you might need, like baking powder and flour and some canned goods and some olive oil. Those things are going to be in the middle too, but you will find that the more you think about nutrient density, the less you're going to be going through the entire grocery store. And you're going to find that there's a path that you can actually get in and out way quicker than having to traipse through every single aisle because you know where those high quality most nutrient-dense foods are. I know we're talking about budget today, and I also want to just discuss this idea of compromise. So in a perfect world, I know exactly how I would feed my family. We would eat all local food. It would all be organic. It would be 100% grass-fed and finished beef. It would be eggs that come directly from chickens who are fed an organic, soy-free, corn-free diet. It would be raw milk, ideally from our very own cow. There would be fruits and vegetables that we grew ourselves or that our neighbors or that someone in our town grew, and they would all be grown in fertile, mineral-rich soil. And then if I had some things that I needed to outsource, I would get them from a very high-quality organic source. Now, is that a pipe dream? No, it's possible. And there have been times in my life and periods where that was actually possible. No, I haven't had my own milk cow yet, but I have been able to purchase milk straight from the farm and, it's about as good. So that is my ideal, perfect world. And I think it's actually good to start there and figure out what is your ideal? If there were zero budget restrictions, how would you want to feed your family? I believe that's a good place to start because it kind of helps us break down what we really believe about food. And then as budget comes into play, and it does in different ways in different seasons, we can begin to make compromises on different foods based on what we know about them and still make a really good choice for our family that may be slightly lower quality food because our budget is lower, but it's going to fulfill our overall goals for our family's diet. So at this very moment, I'm not buying everything organic. I am not buying everything local. There are some foods that I'm just choosing to go without because I can't source them in a high enough quality that I would actually want to feed my family. And so we're just letting them go for now. So health plus budget is going to require a little bit of compromise. However, we can still feed our family healthy food while not spending a ton of money. So let's talk about that now. And I want to give you some tips as to how to decide what things are we going to compromise on and what things are we going to just be really firm on. One of the tools that I utilize is something that's called the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen. There is a company called the Environmental Working Group, and every year they put out a report and they show which of the vegetables and fruits have the most chemical residue on them and which ones have the least. So they call that the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. And I try to the best of my ability, if I'm going to buy something that's on the Dirty Dozen list, I try to get it organic. However, if it is on the Clean 15 list, I don't buy it organic. That is one of the ways that I can very quickly change my grocery budget. Is if I'm looking at oranges and I go, well, organic oranges are this much and non-organic oranges are this much, but I know an orange has a really thick rind. And so anything that's sprayed on the rind, is it going into the fruit? Yes, some of it is getting into the fruit, but it is less susceptible to the outside sprays getting into the food as something with a thin skin, like say an apple or a peach. So anything that has a thick skin that I'm going to peel, I am going to buy that non-organic and save a few pennies in that way. I have used that same principle of peeling with things like root vegetables and even cucumbers. Sometimes organic cucumbers are just wildly out of my price range, but a non-organic cucumber isn't. And so if I buy things that are non-organic because it's a better price, I want to try to peel them and just get off as much as possible of whatever has been sprayed on there. You can also do veggie washes with some vinegar and soak it in your sink for a while. I honestly don't really do that. I mostly just rinse my veggies off really well and then peel them if they're not organic. Okay, now let's talk about bread, because bread is a staple in so many households, and for good reason. It's delicious, it's easy to make things with, and everybody likes bread, right? The tricky thing about bread is that any bread that you buy at the store is really not that nutrient dense. Believe it or not, even if it's seedy, whole wheat, most of the nutrients in the grain has diminished because of the way it was processed and the way it was grown. Now, don't panic. I do have a solution for you, and that is learn how to make your own bread. Ideally, you want to soak and sprout and freshly grind your grains, make bread, and then feed it to your family. But that's a pretty huge ideal, and most of us are not able to do that. But I just want to suggest an experiment to you. Go to the grocery store and grab a loaf of bread that you would normally buy, turn it around, and look at the ingredient list. I bet you that ingredient list is fine print, and it's probably about 3 inches tall. You can make your own bread with 3 ingredients and extremely simply, even if you don't have a lot of tools. And bread that you make at home is going to be better quality, nutrition-wise, than any of that bread that you get at the grocery store. I happen to have a wheat grinder. I buy wheat in bulk, and we'll talk about bulk buying in just a minute. But if I did not, what I would choose to do for bread for my family is I would buy organic, unbleached all-purpose flour, and I would use that and a little bit of yeast and salt and water to make bread. You can make bread so simply. A lot of people have an idea that bread making is hard and that it's complicated, and I'm telling you, it does not have to be. I am going to give you a recipe and instructions for how to make a beautiful artisan loaf of bread that requires no kneading, just a few hours to sit and rise. And it is so easy. You can't mess it up. It's simple, and you're going to love it. Your family's going to love it, and they're going to beg for more. Now, if you have the ability to grind your own grain, do it, because that is going to be the most nutrient dense way you can eat grains. But if you don't, learn how to make bread in this simple way. So just look for the link in the description and I will show you exactly how to do it. Now, I had a question come in from a listener about wheat, and she said, do you think the nutrient density is increased enough that it's worth the time to soak, sprout, dehydrate, and then grind your own grain to make bread? And this could take up an entire podcast all by itself. If this feels too nitty-gritty and overwhelming for you, just ignore what I'm going to say for the next couple minutes. Basically, when you soak a grain until it sprouts, you are increasing the nutrient density of that grain. Then if you're going to grind it into flour, you first have to dehydrate it. So you soak it, it sprouts, you dehydrate it, then you grind it into flour, then you can make bread. There is a quicker way to do this though, and that is to just grind the grain and then make sourdough. Because in the process of making sourdough, that grain, even though it's ground up, is soaking for 12 to 24 hours. So it is minimizing the presence of the phytochemicals that bind up the nutrients. So for my family and my lifestyle, if I'm going to go to the effort to soak something, I'm going to probably do it in the form of making it a sourdough, muffin, bread, pancake, whatever. Because to me, that's going to increase the nutrient density enough that it makes me satisfied with it. Another question that came in was really the heart of this whole podcast. And she asked, how do I know what to compromise on and what to not compromise on? And truly, I think this is a very personal and individual family decision. So I will give you some specifics of what I do, but I'm not saying this is what you should do. I'm saying I want you to think about your food and your family and evaluate what are your priorities? What are the things that are the most important to you? Compromise on the things that are not as important and hold fast to the things that are. Some of the things that I have chosen to not compromise on are seed oils. We don't want to eat seed oils in our family. And you can do a deep dive on that on your own time. But that is something that we've just decided, no, we're not going to do that. They are cheaper. They are easier to come by, but we are not going to go there. So even products that have seed oils in them, we've chosen to avoid those. That's something we're not going to compromise on. So for example, in our everyday life, we're going to go without something like chips if we can't find an affordable chip that doesn't have seed oils in it. And just as a side note, not every single thing in your life has to be replaced. Sometimes it's okay to just let things go for a season or forever. We don't have to have chips to live. So sometimes we find really good deals on chips that are made with like avocado oil or tallow, then we'll buy those. But if it's got seed oils, most of the time at our house, we're going to say, no, we're just going to avoid that. Another thing I truly avoid is glyphosate. Glyphosate is an herbicide that is sprayed on lots of different crops, but it is not allowed to be used on organic crops in the United States. And because of that, I choose to buy organic grain products. Another thing I'm not willing to compromise on is like sprayed on vitamins. For example, if you look at a lot of your grain products like pastas, cereals, breads even, it will say made with enriched flour. And enriched just means that they've taken all the vitamins and minerals out and then they've added a few back. I don't want that. So I choose to buy organic grain products. I also choose to buy grain products that are not enriched. And a lot of times those have to come from outside of the country. So let's take pasta, for example. Pasta is required to be enriched if it's made in the United States. But if it's imported from Italy, it doesn't have to be enriched. And so I will spend a little bit more for an imported pasta that's made simply with organic durum wheat and water, as opposed to the laundry list of ingredients on the back of the cheaper package of pasta at the grocery store. I also pay really close attention to that dirty dozen list. And even though I occasionally will compromise on some of those fruits and veggies and buy them non-organic, I do my very best to stick to that list. So a lot of times things like grapes are highly, highly sprayed. And if I can't get organic ones, I usually choose to just pass on grapes, even though we love grapes. But for my family, I've made the decision that I would prefer to just pass on the grapes because of all the chemicals that are sprayed on them and just wait until I can afford some organic grapes and have them for a special treat. Another thing I choose not to compromise on is cereal. You guys, cereal is so fun, but cereal is garbage. There is almost no nutrient density in cereal that you buy at the store. I mean, it is basically buying air. It's sad. Air sprayed with sugar and chemicals. No, thank you. We are not buying cereal. If cereal is your favorite food and your kid's favorite food, let me give you an idea. Make your own granola. Now, I know. Homemade granola is not the same as Frosted Flakes. It's not the same as Cinnamon Toast Crunch or Lucky Charms or Cocoa Puffs or whatever your favorite thing is. It's not the same, but it is a good replacement and it can be very nutrient dense. I'm going to leave you a very, very easy recipe for granola in the show notes. So go check it out and you can literally whip this up in 5 minutes and then bake it for 20. It is delicious. It is actually going to give you some nutrition and it's going to satiate your kids and they're going to stay full longer than 15 minutes. Pair it with some raw milk or a little bit of homemade yogurt, and you have a breakfast or a snack fit for a king. So those are some of the things that I choose not to compromise on. Now, what am I compromising on? This might surprise you, but I have been compromising on meat. Now, for years, I was absolutely adamant that all meat that we ever had in our home had to be organic no matter what. And in the past few months, I have realized that if we want to eat the quantity of protein in meat that I think is healthy for our family, that is going to have to be compromised on. So I still buy a half a cow at a time from an amazing local rancher who has very high quality meat. So most of the beef that we eat is this amazing, great beef because it's a very good price when you buy it in bulk. And we actually raise our own chickens for meat, and we're able to do that at a very low cost per pound as well. But there's always some overlap where we need to buy some meat from the store, and that is where I've been compromising. I've decided that it is better for us to get that meat and all that protein into our bodies than to not eat it at all because I'm being rigid about it having to be organic. So again, this is something that you have to make your own decision on. Please don't just start doing it because I'm doing it, but I think it's worth looking into it a little bit and making some really hard decisions and deciding, is this something that I'm adamant about, or is this something that I can let go for at least a time? And as we begin to make changes in other parts of our budget and see, oh, I think we could cut back here, but that means we could actually increase over here, then you can make those compromises as well. So not buying organic meat and eggs has given me the ability to be able to focus more on buying the things that I really want to buy organic. Does that make sense? So it really is all about compromise. And you can compromise with integrity when you understand what the different foods are, which things are more nutrient dense, which things are more necessary for your body. The way that your family eats is very specific to you guys. And so I think it's important to just come into this conversation with as much knowledge and understanding as you can. I promised you that I would talk about buying in bulk, and so we're going to do that right now. As we're figuring out what to buy and where to buy it, I just want you to consider that sometimes buying a bigger amount of food is actually going to give you a better price per pound or per ounce. This is true when I'm buying meat. So like I said, I buy half a cow at a time from a local rancher. And that enables me to get the best quality meat for the lowest possible price that I can. Because if I'm buying their meat by the cut, either from their farm, or if I'm going to the grocery store and I'm buying the same quality of meat cut by cut, it's going to be astronomically more than if I'm buying it in a half, because I'm paying the same price per pound for hamburger and for prime rib. I also love that buying in bulk enables me to not have to go to the store quite as often, which probably saves me a little bit of money as well. Another place I love to shop for bulk items, especially bulk produce, is from Azure Standard. You might have heard of them. They are a co-op actually based out of Oregon, and they have drop points all over the US and Canada. So I will leave a link for you and you can check them out. They have tons of amazing products that are really great. They are not all the cheapest, but they are a very reputable and honest company. And so I do love buying from them. They are very committed to having all of their products be extremely high quality. Another thing I really like getting from them, and this is kind of a side note, but I find that I can get really high quality laundry detergent and dish soap in bulk. That is like a quality that I like to have for my family. And I can buy it in bulk and it lasts me like an entire year or two. And I can get it for a fraction of the price that I would if I were to buy that in smaller containers at a different store. So I am a big fan of Azure Standard. And again, I will leave a link in the show notes for you. You can also buy things in bulk at places like Costco or Sam's Club, and they can have some really amazing deals. I mean, buying big bags of cheese or a bunch of eggs at a time, those things can really help you save. Costco has organic all-purpose flour at a very reasonable rate. Also, don't sleep on your grocery store bulk bins. I was actually thinking about this. If you have a grocery store that has things in bulk, go check that out and look at the difference pound for pound for any of the staples that you normally get, whether it's beans, rice, the different grains or seeds or nuts. Look in your bulk bins and see if you can find them and compare if you're buying it in a little package or if you're buying it in bulk, and which one's going to be the best price and the best quality for your family. You can even get spices in those bulk bins, and it is shockingly less expensive to buy a little baggie of like allspice or something than to go to the spice shelf and buy a little container of it. It's ridiculous. So check out your spices there. Check out things that you want to buy in bulk there. Another way to save is to look at what your freezer section has, because a lot of times fruits and berries will be much less expensive if you buy them frozen than if you buy them fresh. Now, obviously, it doesn't have the same charm as picking up strawberries out of the little baskets. But they are delicious and it can still be very full of nutrients and possibly more accessible if you buy them frozen. So don't sleep on the bulk items and don't sleep on the freezer section. And don't take anything for granted. This is something that I've learned as we've been in this whole process of really being very intentional about our grocery budget, is that I would sometimes assume, oh, well, this store is going to be the cheapest for that, or this place is going to be the cheapest for that. And we actually, as a family, went through our receipts and started noticing which things were the best price at different stores. And now we've got it dialed in. I mean, we know which things we buy at Costco. We know which things we buy at the grocery store. We know which things we order from Azure Standard. We know what we're going to get locally and what we're going to buy in bulk and what we're going to buy individually. And we have learned that by just very carefully keeping track of what we're getting where and how much it's costing. Now, that is all thanks to my husband, because he is that nitty-gritty detail person and I am not. But it's been really helpful for bringing our budget in as closely as we can. And now we know we are getting the most bang for our buck every time we shop, because we've decided on our priorities. That's those rocks, right? And we've decided on which things we're able to compromise on, and we have taken nothing for granted, and we have gone through in detail to find out which things are going to be best at which stores. Okay, friend, we have covered a lot of territory today. I hope this has been encouraging and helpful for you, and that you're feeling empowered to look at your food, to look at your budget, to make really good choices for your family in an understanding way. Remember, the goal in all of this is to glorify God. 1 Corinthians 10:31, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, Do it all to the glory of God. I promise to tell you about a couple of resources that I have learned a lot from and really love. The first one is Dr. Josh Axe. He has a podcast, he has a website, he has tons and tons of articles and information that is very clear and very helpful and not confusing. I think there is so much health information and health knowledge out there in the world today that it can feel very overwhelming very quickly. Well, Dr. Axe, to me, is one of those people that synthesizes information extremely well and is able to pass it back to me in a way that feels logical and makes sense and is not overwhelming. So I highly recommend his stuff. I will link it in the show notes. And then another person who is actually a friend of Dr. Axe is Dr. Jordan Rubin. He wrote a book years ago called The Maker's Diet, which is all about how to eat the way God made our bodies to eat. And it's literally the most balanced diet book I have ever read in my life. And I have read many, believe me. I grew up in the 80s and 90s. Remember, that was like diet culture central. But The Maker's Diet is wonderful. And Dr. Axe and Dr. Rubin together have written a book recently that is called The Biblio Diet, which I am very excited to read. I think it's still on pre-order, but I will leave a link in the show notes for you to check that out as well. I cannot wait to read that one. I'm extremely excited. I love learning from the Word of God what is going to be best for my body. I would rather hear that from the Bible than from any expert anywhere else. And so I'm excited about this book. If you want to deep dive into learning how to make amazing sourdough bread, I'm going to recommend that you check out Lisa Bass from Farmhouse on Boone. And I will link her information. She's got tons of recipes on her site. And I think she even has a little course on making sourdough bread. It's brilliant. She's a mom of like 8 or 9 children. She does this on a regular basis. She has a beautiful YouTube channel, a beautiful website with so much helpful information on health and cooking and family. And I love her. So check her out. She's another great resource for you. The third one I'm going to recommend is Sally Fallon and her book, Nourishing Traditions. This is a big, fat cookbook with tons of information in it. This is going to teach you all about nutrient density, all about kind of an ancestral diet of the way of traditionally making foods even more nutrient dense than they are in their natural state. So things like we talked about a little bit, like sprouting and soaking, fermentation. She's got wonderful fermentation recipes in there. So you can make your own pickles. You can make your own sauerkraut, your own pickled carrots or dilly beans, like delicious things that are just made with salt, water, a vegetable, and a little bit of time. And it is worthwhile. And just fermenting your vegetables actually increases their nutrient density by an insane amount, like 1,000% or something like that. You can get so much more benefit out of cabbage if it's fermented than if it's just cooked. So go ahead and try some of those things out. Check out these resources and find what is going to work best for your family in the season that you're in and with the budget that you have. Friend, I bless you today with peace. We all need peace. I bless you with the peace that passes all understanding, that God would keep your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus, and that in everything you do, as you think about food, as you think about budget, as you eat and drink, and in whatever you do, that you would do it all for the glory of God. In Jesus' name. Have a wonderful week, my friend, and remember, motherhood, every part of motherhood, yes, even planning meals and cooking and budgeting is holy work.